Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, who claims to have an alpha male immune system, but takes a daily dose of Claritin because of his chronic allergies. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Folks, thanks for tuning in to the Crime Dawg Podcast. Your host, Johnny FIORICA, sitting alongside me tonight, my trusted co-hosts. First on deck, he is a legendary street cop. He is an undercover cop. He is a SWAT cop. He is a legendary retired police detective in our murder unit, in our homicide unit. David Simpson, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
That's it. That's all I got.
I never know if I should jump right to you if you're going to make a negative comment.
I'm not saying anything.
The person that I'm referring to, that salt and pepper lettuce on top of his head, looking gorgeous to my left. His name is Jason Blanchard. He's a 24-plus year veteran of the Rochester, New York Police Department, currently employed. He is a legendary street cop in and of itself. He worked all over the rock. He worked Clinton section, Lake section, Genesee section. He has worked everywhere, folks, but his claim to fame is he is the lead hostage negotiator currently for the RPD hostage team. He is a self-proclaimed alpha male of our broadcast, and he is the self-proclaimed 1994 Hall of Famer of what we don't know. Jason Blanchard, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Johnny. I feel like the intro was tremendous. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Listen, I got to be honest with you because we are filthy savages. I want to address the elephant in the room, not my waistline. However, I was sipping on my red cup. It drizzled. If the audience sees some dots on my chest right now, I did drizzle some. My red cup kind of sweated it.
Not to be confused with dribble. Drizzled.
It's a
little hot out today.
Right. It is a little hot.
Is it hot in her? Anyway, so David, let's just talk about a couple things right now. So today, I had the pleasure of inviting some FIORICA family members over to the casa. It was one of those 90-degree plus blistering days. I had Asher, your son, who, by the way, is a sponsor, Asher's Lemonade Stand. Asher, his goalie that he defends, Joey Matze, was present at the FIORICA family pool today with his sister, Eliana. And they did run me ragged in a positive way, meaning they made me swim. They made Uncle Johnny swim in the pool for possibly up to an hour and a half.
You actually swam or you were just in the pool?
Well, we were doing what we called relay races, but somehow the kids figured out a way when Uncle Johnny's whale ass went underwater, they would jump over the top of me. And as I started to surface, they would just stand on top of my back and treat me like a platform.
Surfing on you.
And they pretty much surfed on me. But anyways, that's Asher and Joey.
He's great. Joey's great because I love it because Asher plays D and he's big on giving his defenders high five.
Yeah.
Which is great for a little kid to acknowledge his defenders that help him out.
Gamer.
So he's a gamer for sure.
Yeah, Joey Matze, his mom is actually my niece.
They're on the Harvest 2034 team, believe it or not. That's how young they are. The Harvest Lacrosse Travel Team, 2034 team.
Yeah, so my niece was like, we were laughing because she's like, yeah, Joey's in goal. Asher's one of his defensemen. Small world, wouldn't want to paint it. Jay.
Yes, Jonathan. I'm just still trying to get my head around 2034.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it seems a
listen,
bit much.
Big haps for you. I watch Wifey social media. You got your oldest Zach man looking to be a pilot.
So we're starting the college tour, Johnny. So it's probably another reason why I won't be retiring anytime soon, but that's okay.
That adds 10 years.
That's probably 10 years to my career and takes 20 years off my life. So
what schools are we looking at?
We're looking at nothing close. So we just looked at Western Michigan, fairly impressive. And now we're headed out to the Midwest, and by we're I mean not me. So my wife and my son are touring it up, and also taking in the U.S. Olympic trials in Indianapolis, which is near and dear to me, is my second home of Indianapolis.
Sure,
with my cousins and my aunt and uncle. So they built they built the Olympic trial pool on the field at Lucas Oil. So there's 20,000 people there watching the U.S. Olympic trials. Pretty cool. If you're into that sort of thing. So they are. So they're going to check that out and hit a couple college visits along the way. And Purdue will be one of those college visits.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Purdue is
Not looking at the state schools, huh? He's going private.
Purdue is a state school, David, as a matter of fact.
It is.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
But do you have to be a resident?
That is also correct. So if you're not a state resident, it's a little costly. So again, there's family in the state of Indiana that if Purdue is a viable option, that there'll probably be a residency established after the freshman year.
Well, hey, congrats to you and Tara for raising a beautiful boy and for having a great future ahead of him. Hey, shout out to the cousin Blanchards in Indy. I know I talked to them. I had the opportunity to talk to them a couple weeks back at Pop's thing. Shout out to your Pops. I love that guy. But the cousin Blanchards, huge fan of the podcast. So shout out to Indianapolis.
You're strong in the Midwest. Nice hustle. Crime Dawg Podcast is alive and well.
Man.
Very, very well represented.
Make sure those cousins subscribe because we're very close to a milestone.
David is hyper focused on the amount of subscribers to the channel.
Yes.
So I enjoy the banter back and forth on the text string as David again is just hyper focused on it. So I appreciate it, David.
When they showed me the analytics page on YouTube, it literally turned into crack.
Well, listen, we got a good one. I'm gonna segue myself into.
Here we go. This will be a good bump for us.
Good bump. I'm gonna segue, guys. We got a great one today. We have Sergeant Brett Sobieraski, retired sergeant, Rochester, New York Police Department. He is an ultra marathoner. He is an endurance athlete. He is an Ironman. He is everything that I am not. But we have him today. And you guys, if we can have Danny focus in, these are the book. This is the book. We have two of them here, 2 copies. This is the 8 States for Maz. This is the Humanity Tour. Brett is the author of this book. He talks about running across 8 states, starting in the state of Florida, all the way back to his home in Rochester, New York, in honor of our slain brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz, who was murdered in the line of duty to raise money for Tony's family. It's a beautiful story. We hope you stick with us. But folks, stick with us to the end, because if you go on our website, thecrimedawgpodcast.com, that is the with a THE, thecrimedawgpodcast.com. If you stick with us to the end, what we're going to do is David Simpson, because he is so fair and benevolent, he is going to pick one of our viewers from our feedback section from our website. I will say it again, thecrimedawgpodcast.com. He is going to pick one of you.
A lot of pressure.
All you need to do is listen to the entirety of this podcast, and all you got to do is type in the feedback section your name and your address, and we're going to send you a signed copy. These are 2 used ones because me and David actually read them. Yes, we could read. But we're going to send you a new copy.
Who knew?
Send it to you, signed by the author, Brett Sobieraski. Folks, stick with us. We got a good one. We love you. David Simpson, Jason Blanchard, Johnny FIORICA. We're coming at you on the other side. Gold Shield Pro Services, we're your trusted residential and commercial inspection experts. Call us for one of our professional, nationally certified inspectors to make your real estate investment seamless. At Gold Shield Pro Services, we specialize in thorough inspections, providing you with insights you need to make informed decisions. From pre-sale, post-sale, or annual routine inspections, your number one asset is our top priority. Call 662-7725. That's 662-7725. Or visit us at goldshieldproservices.com to book your appointment today. Folks, we told you we had a great guest today, didn't we? Here he is. Ultra marathoner, Ironman, endurance athlete. Just dropped this book, 8 States for Maz, the Humanity Tour. We have Brett Sobieraski, retired sergeant, Rochester Police Department. Thanks for coming to the studio, brother.
Awesome to be in here, man. This is a great place.
So, Brett, we usually talk a little BS first, because as soon as you walked into the door, you immediately pointed to your fantastic kicks. because you said, hey, if I'm going to walk into a studio with Dave Simpson is the sneaker guy, and he's a shoe guy. He's a fashionista.
He is a fashion plate, that dude.
So you walked in and you were like,
look at these things, man. I was like,
I know those.
I dug these out deep. My
love
red
those.
Hey Dudes, and I'm like, and you got the.
We didn't even coordinate. These are Adidas.
Yeah, man.
listen, man.
Only
Came
special
hot.
occasions.
I try never wear the same pair to the podcast. So it's I got to keep track. I should have started a little list because now I forget.
Usually Jason comments on his
The
shoes,
fact
too.
that he just said right now, this said, I try not to wear the same pair to the podcast. I mean, this is David, you're unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. That's
So I hear.
It's the only word I can put on it.
So I hear.
Well, listen, folks, we could go on and on about David's shoe wear. However, we're here to do two things. We're here to promote this book, 8 States for Maz, a Humanity Tour. Again, in studio right now, we got retired police sergeant Brett Sobieraski with us, and we are not going to waste any more time because we're going to get right into it. Brett, first of all, let me just say this. Full disclosure. You and I were together 2 weeks ago, possibly having 1 to 27 drinks. And during that time, I bent your ear and I talked about your book. Ordered it on the Amazons, on the Zons, started to read it. And the first thing I told you, and I don't want to give the book away, but I do got to say one thing. I'm going to say the same exact thing that I said to you. It is such an easy read. And what did you say to me? You said you wrote this one different than your last book.
I did. Well, I wrote it in crayon. So there's no more than like, each word is no more than like 5 letters and a lot of pictures. So, but no, I wrote it like a writer writes. I wrote my first book the way I talk. And it's funny, the first book I wrote, everyone who read it is like, I felt like you were sitting next to me or at the table, like yelling at me and doing whatever you did in the police academy and this one, because we talk a certain way, but we read a certain way. So I wrote it like a writer would write it. And it was something new for me. And they say like, if there's an adverb, like kill it. And so like not a lot of reallys or trulies or honestly or all that. And it was hard to write it that way initially. A lot of revisions, but it definitely reads differently than my first book.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked, and all joking aside, I mean, I was being 100% truthful with you. I mean, I blew through the first 3-4 chapters, like boom, 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 because it really, truly is, folks. You got to get it on Amazon. I'm going to hold it up again. It's 8 States for Maz, a Humanity Tour. It is a great read for a lot of reasons. So I don't want to give the book away, but we do have to talk about it because I got a lot of questions for you.
All right.
So in the beginning of the book, you talk about a little bit of, and I don't know why, because you felt like you had a little bit of guilt with Daryl Pearson, which is why you said basically in sum and substance, you were going full throttle after Mazurkiewicz got murdered, right?
Yes.
So why don't you tell our audience basically what your motivation was for starting this 8 States for Maz and what your motivation was for doing the Humanity Tour.
So you got to go back till 2014 when Daryl was murdered. And it was a completely different time. Cops, we were loved then. We were respected. We were liked for everything that we did. And, I stood in formation with in Daryl's funeral, like we all did. And we went into the war memorial, and it was packed with people. His sacrifice was on the news for months and months and months. And there was fundraisers galore. Like you couldn't turn your head without seeing a fundraiser. It's so much so that where the guilt came from is I was too late and wanting to do a fundraiser for Daryl when he was murdered. And by the time I got around to it, I spoke to some people, and they're like, the family's just worn out. Like they're worn out of fundraisers. And you think about it, every time they go, because they would always go, that you got to rip that scab off again, and it would never heal. So I'll have this tinge of guilt till I die. And so then when fast forward to 2021, when Tony was murdered, it was totally different. I was disappointed. I was angry. I felt like his death was like underreported, underappreciated, underrecognized. And you could just feel it. It was different, right? Because after George Floyd, after Daniel Prude, we were demonized, we were villainified. all, right from the federal government down to the local officials and everywhere in between, the state, county, the fake leaders, I call them, in the community, all those fake people out there. They only come out when the cops perceive to do something bad. And there wasn't the fundraising for it. So that was, I just saw the stark difference, and I'm like, it got me mad. It got me mad, and I was disappointed. I'm like, I'm going to do something to try to change it. And that was the impetus.
Right. And then you go on, and it's in the book, so it's not like I'm giving anything away, or it's not like we're trying to be fire starters here, but you were a little taken back by, I call it home field, right? The RPD. You were a little taken back in the book about how you got support from the rank and file, but you really didn't get support from the people that you were looking for.
Yeah, and we'll get the bad stuff out of the way so we could always end with some good stuff. But part of the reason I did it was, you think about those TAC unit guys and gals. They buried two of their own. There's some OGs in there that had to bury both. And I was like, I wanted them to be directly involved in this. So it would maybe help them heal a little bit, knowing that they're providing for the family, honoring Tony at the same time. And I was turned down by the department for that. And I got over that. I didn't like it, but I got over that. And then after that, after they rejected the TAC unit helping me, there was zero contact with them, like nuns. And to this day, you can't make me understand why. You just cannot make me understand why they did nothing to promote it. Not a social media post, not a press release, not one of those people up there. And again, we're talking about the 6th floor of the administration, reached out. Hey, what do you need? Anything? How's it going? And just in there's all these emotions, negative emotions like sorrow and grief. But for me, disappointment, I can't get over it, man. It's like, I have a hard time. I want to be a better person. And I felt very disappointed. And I'm not sure what it was. It wasn't until like Marathon 44 when this whole 8 States for Mass became a thing on its own. Like, it became this giant thing. And it was really catching steam. And then they're like, oh, we want to get on board. And I was like, honestly, fuck you. It's too late. Too late. And I think they thought they deserved a place to be on board. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works, man. You have your rank, but guess what? I'm not working for you anymore. It doesn't work that way in my life. You earn a spot at the table. And as a side note, I don't want to vector off, but a year ago, my son got in way over his head like I do. I get it over my head all the time. He's got this giant tree out back. They were like $6,000 to cut it down. He's like, I'm going to do it myself. So I was like, proud of him. That's what I would do. He cuts the first limb. He's 15 feet in the air. Comes, hits him in the face, knocks him onto a fire pit. He breaks his back, breaks both feet, unconscious, taken to Strong in the ICU in the trauma bay. And he confided in me. He's like, man, he goes, when they told me I was in the trauma bay when I came to, he goes, I was horrified. You know how many people I followed to the trauma bay who get shot or stabbed or accidents and they die? So, back brace, intensive care, hospitalized for 3 days. A back brace for, 4 months, broken feet, wheelchair. Do you think one person in that administration reached out to ask him how he was doing? Would call him? Hey, how you doing, Zach? Sorry you almost died, but can anything we can do for you? Like, what is that? What is that?
It's a different time, man. It's a different time. And I think that to address it in 2 different scenarios, I really think that you are spot on in 2021. It was when you talked about the George Floyd and the Prude stuff. I think that the anti-cop, defund the police, all that rhetoric and from 2020, 2021, and parts of 2022, were all still prevalent in everybody's heads. I think everyone is just scared to say, hey, you know what, man? We support you. Even our administration. I'm not giving them shade by any means. Either way, how you look at the definition of shade. But at the end of the day, I think that everyone was afraid to do anything except us. We're like, hey, man, we're out there. Jay was on the front line of all these protests, getting shit thrown at him. Mm-hmm. Teddy Critty, who was in his mid-50s at the time, was getting doused with frozen water bottles. And our TAC boys, who literally stood the line, Mobile Field Force, who you did this for one of their brothers, the 8 States for Maz. I mean, they literally stood the line. And seeing what you're describing with Zach, it doesn't shock me anymore. It doesn't shock me because I think the biggest misconception in our community is this brotherhood. I think it's fictitious. I think what people get so mad about, Brad, about the thin blue line, that we all stand shoulder to shoulder and lie for each other, it doesn't exist in most instances.
Well,
I think you find a small group of people that you hang on to, because I guarantee you, Zach's got some brothers and sisters, probably call them every day.
Oh, like
Check
Jack Sargent, like John Devo.
Yeah.
Like Devo took care of him like it was his
But that's what
son.
I'm saying. I think there's a small group of people that now, where when we all came on, it was a fraternity in a good way.
Mhm.
You described the fraternity.
And that's one of the hardest things. I mean, Zach's situation is a little different, but it does not surprise me that that happened to you, even with what you were doing, because I retired at 19 before you guys. And one thing that we talk about him every now and then is TJ, Tommy Janis, gave me a little words of wisdom when I was thinking about leaving. He goes, just so you know, when you leave, you're dead. The machine goes on.
Yeah.
They don't retire your jersey in the rafters. They don't talk about you. They don't even remember your name. Truly. And I had it, I was like, really? And I thought about it. And he's like, just if I ever gave you any advice, remember that, because you're going to be disappointed if you think otherwise. And I swear that was the hardest thing with leaving, is that brotherhood. I got a handful of people that stay in touch with me. And in the beginning, I would reach out to people like it was but it was always a one-way thing. So it doesn't surprise me, the administration and even some of the machine goes on. It's like it's really sad. That's the hardest thing. When people retire, they need to know that. It's a startling thing. Now you're a little bit more doing stuff for the department. You taught, but it's still wildly different than what I would have thought it would be when you leave. I think that was the hardest adjustment.
Now I'm the only guy here that's still dumb enough to be working, right? But I will say this. First of all, I never thought otherwise. I never thought that the machine wouldn't go on when I got right.
Yeah.
Like, you're forgotten about the second you walk out the door.
Right.
Other than the guys and girls that you work with, that you're tightest with, right? In your unit, in your division, whatever that is, right? Or the closest friends that you worked with throughout your career. So the machine goes on. There's no doubt about that. But I will tell you, from a guy who's still working, that one of the things that I've really started to see and enjoy over the last probably 18 months is, because we've had so many people retire, is going to these retirement parties and seeing dudes that I haven't seen for a while, seeing Brett, seeing Blejo, seeing Galetta, saw Tim O'Halloran, right? I haven't seen Timmy in years, and seeing, number one, how like happy everybody is, right?
Yeah.
They're retired. They're happy to be at another party, happy that somebody else has gone out the door, made it to the end of this journey. And I love seeing those guys and talking to those guys and hearing about what they're doing. But you feel, the one thing I'll say is, when you see them, you feel like you don't miss a beat. Yeah. You feel like you were working with them again at some shooting scene on Hague Street, and they're coming out of the division, and you're, dealing with whatever stuff you got going, but you don't miss a beat with those guys that you were, you might not have seen for a couple of years, but when you see them again, it's awesome.
Well, two things. First of all, you mispronounced Hague Street.
Hague.
Thank you.
Thank you. And in honor of our favorite Trevor Powell.
I will say this, folks, stick with us. We're going to be way more positive on the other side, because we're going to talk to Sergeant Sobieraski. Get this book, Amazon.com, 8 States for Maz, the Humanity Tour. Folks, it's a good one. We're promised we're going to be positive. Come with us on the other side. WorkAlerts.com. That's Work Alerts with a Z. Work Alerts helps retail, restaurant, hospitality operators control their labor costs and better communicate with their staff through simple, easy-to-use work scheduling and text messaging system. Set budgeted hours for your departments to prevent overscheduling, manage employee time off requests, and availability. Again, that's workalerts.com, WORKALERTZ.com. Labor management and employee engagement made simple. Folks, welcome back. Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA. Sitting alongside me, as per usual, Jason Blanchard, David Simpson. Our guest tonight, endurance athlete, retired sergeant, Rochester, New York Police Department, Brett Sobieraski. We're going to hold this book up again, The 8 States for Maz, the Humanity Tour. You can get it on Amazon. Brett wrote this book because he went on literally a 50 marathon tour from Florida all the way back home to Rochester, New York. 8 states for Maz. Maz was Tony Mazurkiewicz. He was murdered in the line of duty. God bless him and his family. Brett, I'll tell you what, we promised to continue on a positive path.
Yes.
This segment. So let's start off by talking. We're a big fan of his, but he is a big fan of the pod, Sheriff Tod Baxter. So we know that you did run into some roadblocks that we're not going to get into again, but why don't you carve out and talk about what Sheriff Baxter did for the 8 states?
Yeah. So when I first told him, we were having a cup of coffee, and I told him my plans, and he was like this little kid, like rubbing his hands together, smiling. Like he was more excited than I was when I first told him. He's like, "You need something, let me know." So I didn't want to bother him when I couldn't get people, the crew members together. And so finally, we got some crew together to help me out. And I had this like 11 or 12 day shortage where I had no one to help me, like drive the motor home and give me the food and water. And it was like he could sense it. He texted me out of the blue, "Hey, need anything for 8 states for Maz? You need crew members?" And I was like, it was like heaven sent down this guy. And I was like, "I do, man. I'm short from, I think it was like March 31st to June 11th. And he's like, "Hold on, I'll get back to you." Like a day or two later, he's like, "I got it filled." And he filled it. He came down with Corey Brown for like 4 of the days, sent some deputies down. It was just awesome. And then, we got closer to the end, and I knew we were going to have a ceremony. And I knew it put him in a tough spot, but I asked him if he wanted to be like the MC, and he was all in. And then there was this plan in the ceremony at the end, which, Tod was like the master SWAT guy, like huge detail planner. And he planned that ceremony the same way he did a SWAT operation. Like there's contingencies, there was all these slides. He was just like a godsend.
He's the PowerPoint king.
I'm telling you, he like just crushed it. Like stuff that I wouldn't think of. Cause like you're in the forest, right? You can't see the trees. He's like, "We're going to hang a huge American flag off the PSB. I was like, "Yeah, man, like I wouldn't have thought of that." Then he snuck in a flyover with helicopters, like in the ceremony when it first started. He never told me. He's like, here they come, and they're like, woo. And it was the state police and what's the one with the
Mercy Flight?
Mercy Flight did a flyover, man. It was the coolest thing ever. Like that dude, he just knocked it out of the park, man.
So not to get ahead of our skis, and I know that we do because we have the attention span of 2-year-olds. I'm talking about me and my co-hosts. So just to back up for our listeners and our viewers, you wanted to raise money for our murdered brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz. You came up with this idea. When I say idea, I call it a crazy idea, but you do crazy things because you're an endurance athlete. You decided to run through 8 states, starting in the state of Florida, ending in Rochester, New York, for 50 straight days, running 1 marathon a day. 1 marathon, 26.2 miles a day, folks, running from Florida back to Rochester, New York, to raise money for our fallen officer, Tony Mazurkiewicz. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yes. And it sounds ridiculous.
I remember the first time you told me, I started laughing. I was at a bar with him.
Like, don't get me wrong, man. And the reason the 8 came in is because Tony was assigned to the tactical unit. Right. So the tactical unit number designator is 8. So I would tell people, I'm doing this thing. They're like, "Oh, you're going to run a marathon in each state." And I'm like, "No, I'm going to do a marathon a day for 50 days. You're like, "No way." I'm like, "I'm going to raise 100. And I say, we're going to raise $100,000. And they're like, "No way. Like maybe 50, cut that in half." But yeah, man, that's what,
again, not to get over our skis. So each section in the city of Rochester has a number designee. Okay. One section is number 1, one section is 2, one is 3, one is 4. It goes on. I'm sorry, it used to be 4, but it goes to 5, 6. The tactical unit, which is the street crimes unit that brother Tony Mazurkiewicz worked out of, they are the 8s. So you have 258, 268, 278, 2.
They're car numbers.
Yep. So 8 is their designee, which you thought it was significant. You start 8 states away from New York State, which is like our Stu Schumann, Florida. So anyways, you start and you're like, okay, by the way, I'm not going to get ahead of schedule, but I'm going to name drop for a second because you're doing a marathon a day through 8 states. And I'm going to get to him in a minute, but Ryan Hickey's got one of the greatest quotes ever after you did Marathon 8 when he goes, you could have been done if you'd have just done 8 marathons. But you're like, anyways, I'm going to get to Ryan in a second.
I wanted to kill him.
Yeah. So Sheriff Baxter throws all his support, just like we know Todd does. He's all in. He's always in. He's pot committed to everything he does, to use a poker term. Fast forward, you get this thing off the ground. You decide to buy an RV. You and your woman, your girl, wifey, you guys pick up an RV, you buy an RV, and you're like, this is what we're going to live in for the next 50 days. Well, you were going to live in it for the next 50 days.
Yeah, man. I've never had an RV before, and I searched like high and low, and like there's a price point you have to get to make sure you'll make it to Florida and back. And
To make sure you can live comfortably.
yeah, exactly. Like, that's not mouse ridden or whatever. And so next thing I knew, I had this RV sitting in my driveway, and I'm like
Cousin Eddie. Like Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation.
That's right.
exactly.
Shitter's full.
So you get this RV, you literally invest in yourself. You're like, you know what? I'm going to get an RV. I'm going to drive it to Florida. I'm going to start in Florida. And in the beginning, you have a couple out in Florida that you utilize, friends of yours.
Yeah, from the OC. Well, that's what us cool dudes call it, Orleans County. The OC. The original OC.
The Raccoon Run.
The original OC. Yeah, man.
So
the Drennans.
The Drennans. So they're out in Florida. You and Zach, man, you guys drive the RV out to Florida.
Like we stole it. Like literally like we stole it. Like
It's like the Blues Brothers leaving town.
Oh, like yeah, man. A kid, he drives fast. He drives hard.
So I love the fact. So you go out, you meet the Drennans out in Florida. You're going to start in Florida. The coolest thing is the night before your first marathon, they're like, come on, Brett, come on. We got a bed for you. It's all laid out, fresh sheets, blah, blah. And you look at them, vintage Brett Sobieraski, endurance athlete, ultra marathoner, Ironman. You look at him and you say, thank you. No, thank you. I'm going to sleep in my RV because this is going to be my home for the next 50 days. And I don't want it to be easy, especially not the first night before my first marathon. Correct, Amundo Fonzarelli?
That is correct. I never slept in it before. I wanted to. I thought about it. I just never got around to it. And that first night, I don't think I ever slept. And I taped a picture of Tony up in the bedroom back there. And that whole night I stared at him because there was some light coming in from the garage light. And I remember him just like, I swear I saw him smirking at me like,
oh, no doubt.
You dumb son of a bitch.
100%.
Like, you're about to get
What did you get yourself into?
Yeah, man. He's like, you're about to get into it. And I was like, yeah.
Could see him laughing at you right now.
Oh,
God,
God,
what the fuck are you doing?
He's got that laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the cackle.
Yep.
Well, that's so funny because when I read the book and you said, no, I'm staying in the RV and you talk about the picture of Maz on the wall, he would have been the first one to say, are you out of your fucking mind?
Absolutely.
Are you out of your effing mind?
He would have laughed.
What do you? Oh, he would have
laughed right at him.
He would have been.
you
He would have cackled right at
He
him.
would have heckled you.
Oh,
Said you were not.
Yeah, it was been like he'd be like you're, and he would have went on like he would do because he was a comedian. He would have won a 15-minute diatribe on how crazy you were. Anyway, so fast forward, the Drennans say, "Hey, you know what? Stay here." You say no. You sleep in the RV. Boom. You wake up the next morning for your first marathon. What was your mindset at for your first marathon? I mean, you had 50 in front of you, Brett. I know you ran them. I don't want it to sound like I'm doing breaking news right now, but like you had 50 marathons and this was one.
Yeah, I didn't know what to, because I didn't run a marathon in training at all. Like I just didn't because I didn't want to break myself before I started. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, it was hot as heck. There's these sandy roads down there. I didn't know what to expect. I just knew I had to make it to that day and then figure it out. And the true test was the next morning. When I woke up initially, I'm like wiggling my toes, feeling my legs. I'm like, how's this going to feel? Because I've run another, marathon like runs, and the next day you can't move. So it was like unsettling, I guess, for lack of a better word.
It wasn't marathon 1 that was the issue. It was what it was going to be like on day 2, right?
Correct.
You weren't worried about 1.
Yeah, so I'm trying to like reel it back, like on day 1, and it was very emotional. Like I cried like the first mile thinking about it, and so I was more worried about day 2,
Right.
but still day 1 was tremendously hard, man. It was hot as heck.
Yeah.
But to freeze frame, I'm sorry, Jay, but to freeze frame the story, you're an endurance athlete. And I remember talking to you when you've rode your bike 18,000 miles, you swam across Lake Ontario 47 miles, or more than that. You've done, you're an endurance athlete. So I just want to say, you running 50 marathons in a row, you did Ironmans, you did everything, but to actually do a marathon for 50 straight days, I mean, your mindset had to be totally wired in to where you can't have any distractions, no negativity, because that's what you get into the book. I don't want to ruin it, but your mindset was way more important to you than your physical body.
Oh yeah, because you're not made to run 50 marathons in 50 days. That's stupid. Like it's just stupid, right? You're not made to run 100 miles or, through the desert. So, but I have superpowers. I got 2 superpowers. The first one is I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic that it's not going to be as bad as what it is. And it's weird. Like it's this weird thing I have that I'm like, it won't be that bad. And the other superpowers, I always like dream big. I've always had this like visions of grandeur and dreaming big. And those are the 2 superpowers. And then when you get in the middle of it, you're like, oh shit, man, this is harder. Like it was 5 times harder than I thought it would be.
Was it harder than the 100-mile desert run?
It was harder. Like this was
Really the hardest.
The hardest thing I did was build my house. And I say it in my first book.
Remember when we were
I
talking?
built my own house with my own hands with a lot of good friends who helped me. But I did everything. Like I paid very few people to do things. Like I paid Joe Capetta to put the furnace in because I don't know how to do that. But I wired it, I framed it, sided it, everything. And that I was so far in over my head, it almost killed me. Like it was 9 months of, working full time too at the same time. So
Remember when you were doing it,
that'll always be the hardest.
That was harder than the run.
Oh yeah, that was 90 days of like grinding it out, like 8 hours a day after work and 14-hour days on the weekend. Like it was brutal.
A couple things, and I know Johnny's said this a million times. I think it's impressive, number one, for anybody who runs a marathon, period.
Yeah.
Like that's an impressive thing to say, hey, I ran a marathon, right? Brett said, hey, I ran a marathon for every day for 50 days in a row. I got my ass up in the morning and I went and ran a marathon for 50 days straight. That to me is, amazing isn't even an appropriate word to describe it. And I remember watching you every day. I would look on Twitter, Brett, and it was awesome because you'd see you coming in at the end of the run with whoever was with you, right? And I don't want to get far ahead of your story either, but you coming in, whether it be one of the SWAT boys or Baxter or whomever, right? And you had the flag, and then you'd finish up and tell. I don't want to take the thunder, so tell everybody what you would do at the end of the run. You would swing. What was it called?
Yeah, so it's a mace. Basically, a mace is a metal ball and a metal stick, and I had it engraved. It's my Tony Mazurkiewicz mace. It has his end of watch. It has the TAC unit symbol, his name. And I think that one's 8 kilogram. The head weighs 8 kilograms on it. So 16, 18 pounds. And then I would do 8 repetitions of something.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So I'm like, cool, I'm going to do 8 squats after running a marathon. I do the first one. I'm like, ooh, that's a little spicy, like the knees and the back. And like you could do all different movement with it. But yeah, that was like my tribute to the TAC boys doing that.
Watching you do that, sitting here in Rochester, right? And feeling like you were part of the journey. It was awesome. And I don't know that you totally get how many people were touched and inspired and motivated by that, but that was powerful stuff. Sitting, 1,200 miles away, watching you do that. That was amazing. And to see the dedication and just to push through. And I laughed too, because I don't know where I if you posted it on Twitter or whatever, but you said that you basically have 8 songs that you listen to, and Jackson Browne, Running on Empty was one of them.
Yeah, man.
Is that right?
That is.
Yeah.
So it was there's a lot of coincidences in the book I talk about. And that was one of them. That at that time in my life, I had 8 songs on my list. And Running on Empty. I mean, it's the theme song for the greatest ultra marathoner ever, Forrest Gump.
Absolutely.
Forrest.
Like It's it's his theme song. So yeah.
I remember talking to you though, and I don't want to get off track, but I remember talking to you because you and I have been tight for decades. I remember talking to you and you did like 100-mile runs. You ran for like whatever, 48, 96 hours straight. You swam crazy amount of miles. You've done Ironmans. You've done all this stuff. And at one point you told me, you're like, yeah, I've done 5Ks for charity. I've never really run a marathon. At one point in your life, you were doing all these endurance things, but you had never really signed up to run like one marathon, to run one thing that like a Boston marathon or a New York marathon. Like you were doing these, and I'll call them crazy.
Too easy.
Yeah.
No, man.
That's too easy.
That's not true. Like even 5Ks, I hate 5Ks. You run as hard as you can.
Sprint.
3 miles. Exactly.
Sprint.
I skipped over that.
No, hang on. You run as hard as you could for 3 miles.
But I skipped over. I still have never run a marathon like for time on the road.
Okay.
Ever. I still haven't done
okay, you still haven't done it.
I still haven't
I remember
done it.
talking to you about it. I'm like,
no.
You've done these crazy endurance tests that you test tests. They're your own tests. But it's amazing though that you hadn't done an actual like a Boston or a New York,
even the Rochester marathon.
No, one time I jackrabbited in there. I rode my bike. I was training for like for a Ironman or something. So I rode my bike in the city and I just ran the marathon, not for fun, but with the people I knew without like a bib number and just like help people run it.
But hang on a minute. Hang on a minute.
Just to help people run.
Didn't you just real quick before up against the break? Didn't you run something locally? In uniform, I was working that day.
I ran a half marathon.
Again. So he saw
worst idea ever.
The guy ran in uniform.
My vest.
Right. Yeah.
Ran it.
Yeah.
Full.
It was only Johnny. It was only a half. So it didn't count. It was only a half.
Yeah. It was only a half marathon.
Yeah. Listen, I went to St. Anthony's, but it's 13. I got kicked out of other places. 13.1.
0.1. There you go.
Listen, I put an overtime slip in. So
that a boy. It's all pensionable.
But anyways, folks, stick with us. Ultra marathoner. Endurance athlete, retired sergeant, Rochester, New York Police Department, 8 states for Maz Humanity Tour. Brett Sobieraski is going to be with us on the other side. Stick with us, folks. Asher Beverages, the Rock's leader in old style homemade lemonade. It's Asher's secret recipe, so don't bother asking. If you're looking to impress, want to be one of the cool kids and be the hit at your next party? Bring one of Asher's delicious drink concoctions with you. Asher Beverages old-style homemade lemonade is the way to go. Asher Beverages are available at all local retail outlets. Folks, welcome back. Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny FIORICA. Sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, Jason Blanchard and David Simpson. Sitting alongside us, our guest today, endurance athlete, retired sergeant, Rochester, New York Police Department, Brett Sobieraski. Brett, thanks for sticking with us. Hey, listen, so I want to get into some of the runs. You had your son, Zach. Zach, as we know, drove the RV at Godspeed down to Florida to start this whole shindigger. He also was riding a bike next to you for a period of time. Until that time, how long was Zach with you on, how many marathons did you do with Zach?
He did 5 and he rode the bike next to me for the first 3 of them. So it was just like an awesome, like father-dad bonding time. It was incredible.
That's phenomenal. So you got Zach, man, riding next to you. And then it's like, time out. I have to use my vacation time and I have to go back home. I got to do some police work now, Dad. Gonna have to leave you. I know Zach didn't want to leave you, but after Zach left, you had some of your SWAT brothers come in to help you out. Was there a marathon or 2 in between, or was there a seamless transition after Zach left that the likes of guys like Ryan Hickey showed up?
There's usually was a gap of a day or 2. And so, yeah, before Ryan came, I had to run a marathon by myself. So I strapped on a Camelback and ran 13 miles out and 13 back, and it was the worst marathon ever. It was 95 degrees, humid, the water was warm. It was, and then you're used to, like, for 5 days, I had Zach with me.
Yeah.
And so that one sucked. Like, the ones by myself, for the most part, like, one was in, like, Gastonia. I ran through it was a Walmart parking lot that went to a Home Depot parking lot, and I just did loops, for 20.
When I read that looked just sounded pain. It sounded more painful than running.
Yeah, it was like 3 miles a loop.
3 mile loops.
So So before we get into it, I do want to talk about Ryan. And Ryan, I had an opportunity. Our paths crossed from the time he was a rookie until the time I retired. I think the world of Ryan. I think him and Patrick are stud cops, and I think they're fantastic men. But before I get into anything that Ryan did, I want to talk about what I would have dominated on the 8 states for Maz. I want to talk about how you not hydrated, but you talk about in the book, which I was totally flabbergasted about. You said in the book, all of the stuff that you see marathon runners and endurance athletes kind of squeeze into their mouth like baby food, you basically said it's all sugar. It's all sugar. And if I'm going to eat that, I might as well eat stuff that I like eating. So why don't you tell our viewers and our people that are listening what you would fuel up with when you were on the road?
Yeah, so like that stuff that goos and gels,
Yeah.
it's like eating like Suave hair soap or something. I got that consistency of like gel. So it's absolutely horrible. So when I would, at 3.5 miles, I would get like a Powerade. Then at 7 miles, I would have water and a Pop-Tart. And I did the Pop-Tart there because, they're dry kind of. Like that was my least favorite, but it's still a Pop-Tart. But why can't you put the frosting all the way to the end? You tell me that.
Jerry Seinfeld asked the same question.
They have ones without frosting on. Who eats those?
All right. They should be murdered, but go ahead.
So then at mile, that was 7. And then mile 10, I'd have another Powerade. Then at mile 13 was the favorite of the day, man. A Swiss roll, a ho-ho. Like it was awesome. Like a double pack of them. Just incredible with water. And I was happy because I was halfway done with the marathon. So I'm halfway done with this bullshit. And I get a ho-ho. And then I think it was 16 was another Powerade. And then 19 was cool. It was like one of those little fruit pies.
Like the hostess ones.
Oh yeah, with the sugar on the outside, like cherry, apple, like incredible. So you always look forward to eating it. And then the next thing I ate was one of those peanut butter like Nutty Buddy bars.
Oh, that's
like mile 22.
That's my go-to.
That's what I mean. Like it was like you look forward to eating this stuff. It was all like it's like when your mom puts you the snack and lunch.
But you talked about in the book how when you really did your research, and correct me if I'm wrong, like all of those gooey snacks that you would have, like those squeeze snacks, they pretty much were all sugar anyways, or the nutritional value was almost like you were like, I might as well eat something that I like eating.
Identical calories.
Right.
Identical source of calories.
Right.
So like why do that? People eat those because they're easier like to
Carry.
Yeah, and they don't melt and stuff like that. But yeah, this food was like palatable because after a while you run and it's hot and it's 90. You don't want to eat anything. You're just like, Yeah. But I always wanted to eat those things.
You had me at Swiss roll /
Oh gosh, I love those things, man. That's the thing I miss. One of the things I miss most about East States for Maz, my Swiss roll.
So, Brett, you said I was going to ask you what your least favorite runs were, and it was the Walmart lots looping around. Do you have a favorite one? Like out of all those 50, that might be a tough question to ask. But there's one. Is there one or two that stick out in your mind as like as being a great day or better than most for whatever reason?
Yeah, it was Gastonia, North Carolina. There's a kid up here, Jake, who tried to get on the job, and just it was that during that time when you just couldn't get on the job, like for nonsense. Now they would hire that kid tomorrow.
Sure.
So unfortunately, he's got to go down south to get a job. His mom's a dispatcher, and so he meets up with me on Facebook, and he's like, "Oh, we're going to give you an escort." And so I'm coming into just getting into North Carolina from South Carolina, and there's these police cars, and it's the county of Gastonia. So their sheriff's department doesn't have a road patrol. So there's a county of Gastonia police department, then a city of Gastonia. So I meet these folks, and they start trailing me. And next thing they're like, the Gastonia city guys will be here in a little bit. So I'm running. Next thing I look behind me, and there's like 8 or 9 cop cars behind me, a giant bomb truck. It was
Correct.
For like miles and miles and miles. It was so awesome.
Oh,
man.
my God.
It was incredible. And then they had all the special teams do their training, and they all met for lunch at this outside thing. And I ran by them. They're all like cheering. It's a video. It's on the news down there.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was just incredible.
I did see the video. Yeah,
it was
that
so.
Did you feel like you could have ran 700 miles afterward?
Oh, God, I was doing like 7-minute miles. And it was just like, just so awesome to see these people who never met Tony, like, you know, honoring his sacrifice.
All in.
And then the bomb guy was this really cool sergeant. You could tell he's done stuff in his life, you know, seen things. He had that look in his eye.
Yeah.
And he had me meet with like 25 other cops after that run and tell them about Tony. And it was just cool. It was like really cool.
And their local media covered it.
Oh yeah, they covered like crazy, man. They was, you know, they had a PR guy, like a civilian PR guy for the police department. And then he's like, "Where are you staying tonight?" This Jake kid. I'm like, "I don't know, Walmart. I'm gonna find one." He's like, "No, you stay at the police department." And they gave us a swipe card. We had the whole access to their whole department.
No kidding.
Oh, it's amazing.
Their whole, even a laundry facility there. And then it shift change. They're all coming up, shaking our hands, passing condolences, giving us money, buying shirts. It was cool.
So that was your favorite run. So I always wanted to ask you, was there a particular state? You know, you drive through these states and you think about, you mentioned Forrest Gump and like the visual of the movie, the different things he saw. Was there a particular state that was like the route was scenic, or the people, like, was there a particular state that like was your favorite? Like, wow, that was cool.
No, I'll give you the opposite. If I never go to West Virginia again,
Let's say the hills.
I would not, like, that place kicked me in the balls so many times, like running up these mountains.
The mountains, yeah.
It was crazy. Like it was ridiculously hard. Like there's days I'm like, there's no way I'm making it up this mountain.
Who ran with you on those days?
So
Baxter, one of them?
Like, I got to say, like 90% of the time I ran by myself because there was only one person down.
Yeah.
So like when Todd came down with that whole crew of Todd, Corey Brown, Jason Rudolph, Patrick Hickey, that was the first time I steadily had people running next to me, and it was a game changer, right? You got brothers that you love, man.
Yeah.
And guys that worked with Tony, like Patrick and Todd. So like it was this like connection with Tony that made it awesome.
So one of the cool things that I said I wanted to circle back to Ryan, because I want to touch upon Ryan because not only is he a great person, but he's a great cop, great detective. But I want to talk about him because Ryan has been with you from day one, right? And I thought that was really cool about the book, how Ryan Hickey was with you on all these crazy adventures that you decide to do. And I call them crazy because I can't do them. But Ryan shows up, and you talk about in the book how as soon as Ryan gets there, he's all business. He's scouting out your path. He's scouting out this. Because Ryan, VMI graduate,
Yep.
he is a soldier. He knows, okay, here's the game plan. Here's what we're going to do. He's dialed in, Ryan, on everything he does. And now you got him. Zach leaves. You do a couple marathons. Ryan Hickey shows up. And now you got Ryan there. You got to feel great when he rolls up on the set.
Oh, yeah, because that's a dude. I always say, like, in the face of chaos, that guy is stoic as hell.
No doubt.
Like, just a stoic guy. And, like, it's like SWAT. It was no different than working with him in SWAT. He asked me what he had to do, and then he just did it flawless, man. I love that dude. He's you talk about like one-liners,
Yeah.
like that dry sense of humor. Like,
Yeah.
what a great dude.
Yeah, him and Patrick are the two of them are really actually funny. They're low key, and when you get loudmouths like me walking in a room, I kind of drown guys like that out and I should be just shutting up because they are 10 times funnier than I ever thought I was. But I thought it was really cool because you talk about Ryan in the book because you've done these other endurance tests for yourself, and Ryan was there with you on all those ones, helping you out, running with you. And Ryan is truly, I know you talk about the gray man in your first book, you know what I mean? And Ryan is just that guy Ryan's kind of like Barry Sanders. Like, he's a super stud person, but he scores his touchdowns. And he just kind of gives the ball to the ref and goes back to the bench. Don't want no accolades.
No show, all go with that dude.
No
And so
yeah.
I take him out to Badwater with me. Now it's a 135-mile run through the desert, Death Valley.
Yeah.
And the day before, he cracks his toe with flip-flops. He cracks it on like a hideaway bed. And I see him limping a little bit. I'm like, "What's up, Ryan?" He goes, nothing wrong. Then the next day, that day, dude ran a total of 31 miles with me with a broken toe, never said a word. That's Ryan Hickey.
That's the dude that he has back in his
Yeah.
endurance stuff. That's the guy you want on your side. I love it. I love it. So listen, we talk about Ryan Hickey, and then on the flip side, what I want to get into after this break, I want to talk about a guy who helped you out with your social media platforms. I want to talk about a retired, was Hank a lieutenant?
Sergeant.
Okay. So I want to talk about Hank Kula because you talk about him in the book. Hank and I, our paths kind of crossed a little bit through some cases that I had, if I remember correctly. I always thought the world of him. He's a great guy. But I want to get into, after the break, what Hank did for you on this tour, because I think Hank is definitely worth mentioning after this. Folks, stick with us. We're going to talk about Hank Kula after this. Brett, thanks for sticking with us, brother.
You got it.
Folks, thanks for sticking with us. We are the Crime Dawg Podcast. Your host, Johnny FIORICA, sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, David Simpson and Jason Blanchard. We are sitting along with endurance athlete and retired police sergeant, Brett Sobieraski from the Rochester, New York Police Department. Folks, before we go on, here is Brett's book, The Humanity Tour, 8 States from Az. He ran 50 marathons from Florida to Rochester, New York, every day, nonstop, to raise money for our fallen brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz. If you would like your own personal signed copy by the author, the man, Brett Sobieraski, all you need to do is go to thecrimedawgpodcast.com and go to our feedback section. Type in your name and your address and how we send this book to you, and Brett will send you one copy to you. We're only giving one copy away. So when you go on our feedback section, you may be first, you may be fifth. I don't know, but we're going to let David Simpson decide who gets the copy.
Say nice things.
You cannot get a copy unless you drop the title of the book, Brett's name, and your address and who to send it to. Feedback section, thecrimedawgpodcast.com. Brett, thanks for sticking with us. We know that we talked about Hank Kula before we went to break last time. Hank is a retired sergeant from the Greece Police Department. Greece is a suburb of Rochester, New York, one of the biggest towns in upstate New York. You didn't know Hank, according to your book, which I trust you because I read it. So Hank and you didn't know each other. Hank reaches out and says, hey, Brett, I think what you need to do is you need to promote this stuff on social media and get going on that to promote as you run through these states. Why don't you tell us the value that Hank Kula brought to the 8 states of Az?
It was crazy because I knew of him, like great cops, right? Their reputation precedes them.
Yeah.
And he was a big crime scene investigator. And I'd see him teaching at the academy. He reaches out to me and he's like, who's doing your social media or your, who's letting the media and the jurisdictions you run through, who's letting them know? And I'm like, I shrug my shoulders. I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, I like to do that. And I'm like, sure. So I'd give him my route. And then he would let all the jurisdictions know and the news outlets and the paper outlets that I was coming through. Then all of a sudden I started getting all these escorts. And some of these roads were pretty dangerous.
Did he have a background in did he have a background in
He used to be a journalist. He says he's a recovering journalist and a recoving police officer.
And he's a photographer too, right?
And a great photographer.
Yeah.
Like great
Renaissance
photographer.
man?
Yeah,
He's definitely a Renaissance guy.
Leonardo da
And
Vinci.
so all of a sudden now I'm getting,
Paint?
we're doing interviews every day, like through all the other states, with paper folks, with journalists, and on the news.
That's cool.
I'm getting escorts. Like that dude, I cannot thank him enough for what he did. And then he followed me the last 3 or 4 days, just documenting pictures of my last marathons. It was awesome, man. Like he captured some of the great. He helped me with the cover of the book. That was his doing.
Yeah.
Doctoring that thing up. Incredible.
Well, shout out to Hank Kula because, him promoting it, you promoting it, like Jay was saying in the first couple segments, I would wake up every morning because you and I have a relationship that goes way, way, way back.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be with you for several reasons. Number one, I can't run 14 feet. But more importantly, you were doing something that I 100% couldn't do. But my love and my heart was with you every single day, along with the thousands of other cops and law enforcement personnel that were in you or with you in spirit as you ran those miles for our slain brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz. I want to talk about, aside from the benevolence of a guy like Hank Kula, I want to talk about a couple. And I want to talk about David Boots, a.k.a. Boots, and Ellen. They own Fleet Feet in Rochester, which is a shoe sneaker place. And they also own, is it Yellow Jacket Racing?
Yes, sir.
And I tell you what, man, I've never met Boots, and I've never met Ellen. I have never, and growing up in Rochester, you come across a lot of people and a lot of people, and I never met those two, but I met a shit ton of people that know both of them, and I've never, ever heard a bad thing about either one of them. And their benevolence, not only to this thing, which is what I want to dive into, but to the Rochester community as a whole, is unbelievable. So Fleet Feet Rochester, shout out to them. Shout out to Boots. Shout out to Ellen, the owners of Fleet Feet. But why don't you talk about what Fleet Feet Rochester did for the 8 states of Mass to support our brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz, and your run?
They jump right in and want to be a sponsor. You think about it. It's a time when there was still this simmering of anti-police sentiment.
100%.
So the smart business move, right, is let's play the center line. Don't commit to one side or the other.
Or do it behind the scenes.
Yes, but they're like, no way, because they're so altruistic, and they're like, no, we're going to honor this man's sacrifice. It's the right thing to do. They chose the right thing to do, maybe not the smartest business thing to do. And right from the beginning, so they make this special page where you can sign up to run the last 3 miles. We ended up with 900 runners running the last 300 miles. You could also donate on that page. Then that money went right to the Locust Club. And then you could buy a shirt on that page that Matt Pataki had these shirts made up. And then you could do this virtual run. So the virtual run or like bike or what activity was, if you did 26 minutes and 20 seconds, kind of like it was a mini marathon every day. She had hundreds of people do that. And then they planned the finish route where, the last 3 miles where we had all these people running behind us, where we congregated at Genesee Valley Park. The finishing ceremony, they were a big part of that. And I had so many screw ups, because I never did, again, forest through the trees, like all this planning on my part that I didn't do. They took care of all of that. They worked their butts off for nothing, free of charge. Then to make it better, they're like, okay, pick up your shirts, and anything you buy in the store, we're going to donate 8% back to 8 States for Mass. Just incredible people. Yeah. And it was great to see Tod Baxter. He gave Ellen one of their civilian awards at one of their awards ceremony. He didn't tell her. She got this cryptic email, show up here for something or other. And she shows up and they lay this award on her, man. It was awesome.
Great.
It was great.
That's phenomenal. The way you outline in the book regarding Fleet Feet and regarding Ellen, how she just was, number one, she dove right in, and how she literally built the website and had not only a website, but like you had just described, all these splinter things going off and how she was organizing all this stuff behind the scenes is a true testament to that there is still not only good people in the world, but great people in the world. So shout out to Boots and Allen at Fleet Feet. We love you for everything that you did for not only our brother, Brett Sobieraski, but in support of our brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz, and the Rochester Police Department Tactical Unit. Shout out to you guys. Yeah, that was really super cool. Jay, you got something to add?
Well, I was just going to say, right? I mean, what happened to Tony being murdered in the line of duty, right, is about as tragic of a thing as you can think of that, a family in law enforcement has to deal with, right? That officer isn't coming home, right? And you think about all the things positive that came as a result of that, right? And the community rallying around what Brett did. Brett taking the time to think about this and a way to honor his brother and to do this and to pay homage to the sacrifice that was made. Not only the sacrifice that was made by Tony, but the sacrifice by Lynn and the rest of the family that they deal with on a daily basis. And the positives that come out, that's what you have to take with you and think about going forward, because if you focus on, the negative and the evil that took Tony from us, that'll eat you up. So this stuff is a way to channel that energy, channel that stuff, and it's just a tremendous thing. It's awesome to see people rally around that. It's an awesome thing that Brett did, and not many people could, and Brett, again, man, I'm so happy that you're sitting here with us. I'm so happy that you did it, took the time with us. You inspired more people than you know. It was awesome. I mean, it's like the biggest understatement you can say to say that it's awesome, but it was awesome that you did that and the way everybody rallied around it.
I thought it was great that the family got to see that support, like on June 11th when we come running in with 900 people, another 300 there in the crowd. It was just like the squeaky wheel gets the grease a lot of times, and it was all these anti-police folks. But they figured out that, no, man, there was still this groundswell of support for remembrance and honor for Tony. So that's what I remember.
That was one of the best things I got out of the book when I read it. Obviously, we talked when you were doing it, and I followed it along. But one of the best parts of the book, and when people read it, is the humanity side of it, because you get you read the negativity, and I was telling you the other day, you get kind of down the road of negative, and it really was a little uplifting for me to see just the strangers that were all in and supporting you, and that showed love for Tony on the run, and that really touched me. That was my favorite part of the book that you put in there, is just seeing that people in America are still good at heart, because I told you the other day, it's like, I don't see that. And then the book kind of showed me that a little bit. That was great.
You listen to national media and you're like, oh God, we're all at each other's throats. The end of civilization's here. We hate each other. The America I saw was indescribably beautiful at the ground floor. Like, I ran through red states, blue states, purple states. It didn't matter what state I ran through. There was great people who honored a man they never knew, gave me the last dollars out of their pocket for a family they never met. It was awesome. Change. Like, I've always been a cup half full kind of guy. Now I'm like a cup runneth over guy. That's how I named it the Humanity Tour.
It's my favorite part.
With you, though, when you talk about the waitress that gave you some of her tips, it's funny because we've seen people murdered at our feet. The things, and I'll say this throughout the course of our podcast, the things that our eyes have seen and our ears have heard as police officers, I wouldn't wish it on our worst enemy.
Yeah.
But when I hear, when I hear stories about the waitress that you came across and she reached inside her apron to give you some money, or how Lynn Mazurkiewicz gave you those 8, is it rocks that she gave you?
Little heart-shaped stones, blue ones,
stones, yeah. And you chose, it was a specific place in each state that you so carefully decided, even as you're running.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been sucking wind going, oh my God, when's this going to be over? And the way you were methodical and like, hang on a minute, let me stop and let me put it here, because this is where I think Tony and Lynn would want this stone to be. She gave you 8 stones. You placed one stone in each one of your states that you passed through. And I thought that was just, besides the waitress, that was...
Yeah.
Do you ever get drawn back to go, do you ever think about going back to see if they're there, or if I ever drive?
The one place I want to go to is Parisburg. It's called Parisburg. And it was by the Appalachian Trail, and where all these people were coming off the trail, all beat up, mosquito bitten, head down, all sad. And I'm like, oh God, if Tony was here, he'd make fun of every one of these people. He'd be like, you thought this was a good idea? Yeah. So I left one there, and I may hike the Appalachian Trail sometime in the, not near future. And so I would definitely stop there and see if I know where I placed that stone at the sign, covered it with a little.
You know what it reminded me of is in Shawshank, when he sends Andy Dufresne on the road to dig up the tin can and stuff like that. That's what it reminded me of, is I almost would be drawn to go back in a couple of years and see if
and the other one
any of them are still there, just driving maybe you drive to Florida and you stop.
Yeah, the New York sign. I placed one when I came into New York State, and there was those, Baxter had all these people lined up, 25 officers there. And I placed it just on the Pennsylvania side of that sign. And that's another one I could easily find. Some other ones I probably, it'd be happenstance to find them.
Track it down.
Yeah.
So, Brett, I mean, and listen, man, I know it's emotional for you. I could see that throughout the course of this discussion that we've had, this interview that we had, you've gotten emotional, and rightfully so. What was it like when not coming into New York State, but knowing it was the last marathon and you had all of this support behind you? Like, was your heart like jumping out of your chest? Or I mean, I know you're an emotional dude in a good way. I mean, when you're coming towards the PSB and you got all these people behind you, in a good way, this cult following that you created in honor of Tony Mazurkiewicz, what did that feel like? Can you put it into words?
It's hard. Like I looked at it as I was like this conduit to Tony. So they were there for him. And I kept looking behind me because as we stretched out on Robert Wilson Boulevard by U of R, I just kept looking. And as far as I could see were people, 10 abreast. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I promised Lynn, I met her like a couple days before I left. That's when she gave me those blue stones. And I promised her, I'm like, we're going to come in with 500 people, an army. And we came in with 900. And it was just, it was like this, you could just feel like the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the fellowship, love, remembrance. It was beautiful. And I say it was for me, it was like a protest.
Yeah.
It was a protest against the people that vilified us. It was a protest against the people that want to do violence against cops. But the difference with this protest was we didn't throw bottles. We didn't dox people. We didn't spit at people. There was not a foul word said. There was not one act of aggression. It was all built out of love and remembrance and honor. So the difference between us and the people that are against us, it just shows it. In the petty side of me, I try to be a better man every day, and I fail often. But the petty side was that all those people that hate us had to watch it on the news that day because everyone covered it, and just see this 1,200 people packed in tight and not one act of violence, not one foul word said. I was like, they had to be so upset that this is what respect and honor and dignity and civil acting civilly looks like. Not what it looks like when you're trying to burn down the PSB.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, you know what? I've worked with you for years. I'm never at a loss for words, but I don't think that there's a better tone to end this podcast on. Brett, thank you for honoring our brother, Tony Mazurkiewicz. Thank you for honoring our profession. Thank you for what you do to make everybody in law enforcement and the criminal justice community look good. You are truly a man amongst boys, and we appreciate everything you do. And I don't know what your next adventure is going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be a good one. And I'm just going to say two things. God bless you on that adventure. And I will say that as long as the Crime Dawg Podcast is live and running, you, my brother, will always have a forever seat right next to me on this podcast. I love you to death, man.
Love you, brother. Appreciate it. You guys too.
You're the man, Brett.
Thank you.
Folks, thanks for listening. We told you we had a good one. Our brother, endurance athlete, Brett Sobieraski, retired sergeant, Rochester, New York Police Department. Go get your book, 8 States from Az, and encourage David to pick you to get a signed copy. TheCrimeDawgPodcast.com. Folks, listen to all future episodes. Go to TheCrimeDawgPodcast.com. Go to our YouTube channel, at Crime Dawg Podcast. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?